What if I told you that Goldilocks and the Three Bears was hiding a secret about how we interact with other beings of consciousness? This is the metaphysical meaning of Goldilocks and the Three Bears that I have uncovered through neurodivergent pattern recognition. Okay, so even Albert Einstein said, if you want your children to be intelligent, read them fairy tales. If you want them to be more intelligent, read them more fairy tales. Well, thank you, Papa and Mama. In this story, Goldilocks has to try 3 different porridges. Daddy's porridge is too hot. Mommy's porridge is too cold. The baby bear's is just right. But what if the porridge has to do with our consciousness? Goldilocks being our consciousness, how our consciousness interacts with the porridge. And what is this porridge in physics? It's plasma, the 4th state of matter. I swear this will make sense. Plasma is the 4th state of matter. It is rarely taught about in school. I wonder why. For those of you that don't know, there's something called the intelligent plasma hypothesis. This astrophysicist hypothesized that plasma can hold intelligence. This guy, Robert Temple, wrote a book about how plasma is sentient and intelligent within itself, and that plasma, specifically dusty complex plasma, exhibits behaviors of plasma intelligence akin to human intelligence and even beyond. Basically, plasma can move in sentient ways that shows that it's responding and reacting to things. Dusty plasma is found in space. It can also self-organize, which shows an ability of some type of sentience. The real question is not, is plasma conscious? We know plasma is probably sentient. The real question is, can plasma hold consciousness? Specifically have a theory that plasma can hold and is the vehicle for consciousness. I'm writing a book in this. The link is in my bio. But now let me go back to what plasma is and how it relates to Goldilocks, and how it might shed light on what type of plasma can actually hold consciousness, which has implications for the future, such as, can we build something where we can communicate with other consciousnesses using plasma across realities, across the universe? So plasma is not really taught about in schools. It's the 4th state of matter. There are hot plasmas, like the Papa Bear's hot porridge. They're like plasmas in fusion reactors. These plasmas are sentient and they have a chaotic environment. So they are probably too hot to hold structured thought or consciousness. And then we have cold plasmas. This is like Mama Bear's porridge. Now, some types of cold plasma, which is actually working on curing cancer right now, this is closer to what actually might be able to hold consciousness. But it's not just about temperature. And some plasma might be too cold, which means it's too slow to where structured thought won't be able to be. It's not an ideal place for an active intelligence if it's too cold. But what about if it's just right? I started thinking, what if just like the baby bear porridge, which is just, our bodies are tuned to a very specific temperature and very specific conditions that consciousness can arise. I don't have all the keys or I'd have a Nobel Prize, but here's what I do think it hints to, that there is a porridge or a plasma that can be just right to sustain consciousness, for consciousness to emerge. So one of the leading theories on consciousness is called Orch-OR Theory of Consciousness. They believe that quantum processes happen in the brain in what is called microtubules. This was proposed by Nobel Prize winner Roger Penrose. Sorry, I might have got cut off. Roger Penrose, the Nobel Prize winner, and Stuart Hameroff, who was an anesthesiologist and now studies, obviously, and talks about Orch-OR. In the microtubule, there's something called a tubulin. And in this tubulin, the tubulin has 2 dipoles, and on each side of the dipoles are differently charged. Between in this tubulin is what is theorized to be an electron dust cloud, which is what they call it in an Orch-OR theory. Fun fact, this looks a lot like a plasma ball. So in Stuart's paper that he writes about on the consciousness.arizona.edu website, this is from a study in 1983, Hameroff on Watt. They talk about these electron clouds inside the brain proteins inside microtubules that seem somehow related to anesthesia and consciousness. This guy, Rich Watt, mentioned the electron clouds were a plasma or a corona. They called them corona discharges. A corona discharge is, in fact, a type of plasma. This is going on in the brain. I am theorizing that consciousness is arising, this is my opinion, because of the plasma in the microtubule. This is what, to me, proves their theory and makes it true. And I would call this plasma in the microtubule the Goldilocks zone, or what is called an intermediate plasma. It is not just about temperature. Whatever is happening in this tubulin, in this electron dust cloud within this in this plasma, is just the right temperature and just the right stability to sustain conscious thought, consciousness. The dusty, complex plasma that Robert Temple spoke about, that he said it was intelligent, this is also a close thing, or also an intermediate plasma. The question is, what about it in our brains and our microtubules as humans makes us be able to sustain consciousness besides the perfect type of plasma? Those of you people who are science nerds, plasma-like behavior happens after a remarkably small fraction of the gas has undergone ionization. Remember, plasma is known as an ionized gas in science. An intermediate plasma, sorry, I got cut off. I don't know where I was, but basically this intermediate plasma would be partially ionized. A fraction of it is ionized, just like in the microtubule, where I believe it is partially ionized plasma, or this corona discharge. As soon as the ionization starts to happen, this is when it can undergo self-organization and exhibit those complex properties. And remember, this could potentially also happen in what's called a cold plasma. Anyways, I know this was very complex. I hope this made sense. Basically, through this Goldilocks analogy, my brain came up with the fact that possibly consciousness has to do with temperature. It has to do with depending on temperature. And if we could just figure out the right Goldilocks zone of plasma and what else there needs to be for consciousness to arise, where humans are the perfect model of that, we maybe, just maybe, will be able to harness plasma to communicate with other consciousnesses, like an interdimensional plasma telephone. And I think that Goldilocks hints at this with her porridge and the baby bear. Also, fun fact, bears are a sign of the divine feminine. That is the same as plasma. Plasma has to do with the surrendering, being in the receptive mode, where consciousness is more divine masculine and action. I think that this was subconsciously chosen, obviously, for a reason. And the divine feminine porridge is plasma. Last thing about plasma, coherence is something that usually cannot happen in a hot plasma. There's something called quantum decoherence, which is why hot plasma would not be a good container for consciousness, because there is what is called thermal noise, which would make the coherence needed for consciousness almost impossible. In a cold plasma, or what I call an intermediate plasma, quantum coherence is possible. The particles can maintain their quantum wave-like properties, allowing them to exist in states of superposition and exhibit interference patterns, which is a key characteristic of quantum mechanics. Basically, we could definitely use it as an interdimensional telephone. This would explain why the sun is definitely not conscious, as people think it might be, but how it is sentient. It is an amplifier. Just like using fires in rituals, just like how people prayed to the sun gods, maybe there is something to plasma and hot plasma and amplifying consciousness, and it being sentient, much like how a wildfire would respond to its environment, but it does not actively think it's burning or knows it's burning. There is a sentience with plasma, and maybe the ancient people knew that when they would pray to the sun. Or maybe, just maybe, some kind of consciousness used the sun as a vehicle, maybe through using radiation as the vehicle. So the sun would be a vessel, the radiation would be a vehicle. And maybe there are some higher conscious beings that have tried to communicate with us through fire in a way where we can't really maintain thought, but maybe we could still feel feeling, because plasma and sentience have to do with feeling. So maybe these cultures were feeling the vibes of plasma and the sun. It makes sense to me. This was probably the most complicated video I've ever done, but I feel like you'll put some things together. And I would love to know your thoughts on how the Goldilocks thing, the Goldilocks story, how it ties in with plasma and maybe ways I didn't think of, or consciousness. With that, I say goodbye. And if you're more interested in plasma intelligence, you can sign up for the link in my bio for my book, A New Force, which will be out in a few months, all about plasma and consciousness, and how you can harness plasma with your consciousness to live a much cooler life and a more deep experience here on Earth. I also have really cool plasma sweatshirts. Bye!